All right, what a great panel. So much of what we talk about with data mesh is around the balance of people, technology, and culture. And that dovetails nicely into our next discussion. How do you bridge the worlds of people and data, the analog and digital, to successfully transform your business? Rashad Tobacco is the author of Restoring the Soul of Business, Staying Human in the Age of Data. He's a speaker and an advisor to several companies, including ours. He also advises the Publicis Group, where he served as its global chief strategist and growth officer. Please join me in welcoming back Brett Hurt and introducing our special guest, Rashad Tobacco.
Hey, Rashad, it's really great to see you. It's been a while, and I always love our catch-ups.
Well, thank you for having me on this important conference and summit for you, Brett. And I always like seeing the frozen picture of your kids behind you.
Yeah, I can't believe it. I can't believe we're at that age now of college tours, at least for our oldest.
Exactly.
So I always love your book, and the title of it alone is just awesome. Restoring the Soul of Business, Staying Human in the Age of Data. And maybe that's a good place to start. I mean, first of all, just you came out with the book about a year ago. How have things been going with the book and with speaking around the book, and just what have you seen in terms of companies now becoming more human when it comes to working with data?
So the book actually came out 2 years ago. It came out 3 months before the lockdowns and shutdowns.
Yeah, everything's a time warp. Rashad.
Yes, so it came down. It came out, did very well. Sold a lot of books the first 3 months, and then once it was decided that books were not an essential item, and everything closed, including Amazon did not deliver. We basically had almost no sales for another 3 months after that. And then we quickly pivoted towards a new platform called Glos, which is in the cloud. And then sales took off. And in fact, it's done much better than my publishers expected. And they're asking me, where's the second book? So that's good. And the first book, because of people like yourselves and others, it still sells about 1,000 copies every month.
That's fantastic. And you started a blog as well.
Yes.
Based on this crazy period that we've been through of the pandemic. Can you talk a bit about the blog and where people can find that?
Yes. So it's basically a thought letter. And this is the way of, you're talking about knowledge and learning. I wanted to basically learn about Substack because I was seeing a lot of writers leaving magazines and newspapers and starting their own Substack. So I said, what the hell is a Substack? So I learned about it. It's a combination of a content management platform, an email platform, and a billing platform built on Stripe. And if you decide not to charge, and I do not charge, you can use those two platforms for free. If you charge, you have to pay 10% of your revenues. But I said, okay, I'm just going to see how this works. I'm going to write something. So I basically put out a thought saying, I'm going to write on the future does not fit in the containers of the past. I'm going to write once a week. It's going to be free. If you'd like to get it, it's 100% opt-in, sign up. And I started writing, and I thought I'd do it once in a while. It just so happened that people liked it. I've now written 82 weeks in a row. So I'm matching, your weekly update. You write your weekly update, I write mine.
Right.
And we now have about 25,000 readers. And so people can find it at rishad.substack.com. That's rishad.substack.com. And the subjects are very different. So every week, introduce a new subject. It takes 6 minutes to read. I also introduce a new artist. So there's a little bit of, so it'll be everything from the last one was on how to sell better. The previous one was about generosity. I've written about dignity. I've written about career management. I've written about between the data and the reality falls the shadow. All of that.
So diving into your blog and your book, when you think about working with data and analytics, which is something that, that's all we really think about at data.world. And we're really focused on creating knowledge superheroes in the companies that we work with. How do you think about, traits like generosity and empathy and compassion when it comes to working with data and analytics? And What are some of the best examples you've actually seen that have really inspired you?
So very simply, the way I look at it is companies today cannot operate without data. I basically believe data is like electricity. You're going to be blind, deaf, and dumb without it. Uh, and the more different access to different types of data you have, and the more you get access to it, which is a lot of what you all provide, uh, is fantastic. So I start with basically saying it's absolutely perfect and fine. But also, I also believe that very few companies can differentiate themselves using just data.
Mm-hmm.
That while it is an absolute essential ingredient, it's not the oil that makes the difference. It's how you refine the oil. It's how you use the data.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where the people come in. And I also remind people algorithms are written by people too, right? So that's where the people come in. And there, what you need is diversity of different people to look at the data or the
Mm-hmm.
results. You need to understand often when the data tells you one thing and real life tells you another, maybe real life is correct, or you have to interrogate the data. So in my book, I have a chapter called Too Much Math, Too Little Meaning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where I basically say, how do you extract meaning from all this data? Without the data, you may not have meaning, but you need to have that. So I'll give you 2 or 3 examples. I'll give you an example of a company that used it wrongly and a company that used it right. And both are sort of data oriented companies. So a company like Wells Fargo had a lot of data, and they decided to run their company on opening new accounts.
Mm-hmm.
But what they refused to acknowledge was if you only incentivize people and measure people by opening new accounts, your teams might start opening fake new accounts or keep selling people new accounts, whether they're dead or whether they need one. And so Wells Fargo eventually had a plummeting stock price, 4 CEOs in 5 years, because they were data driven, but they were data driven based on something that was important to them, which was opening new accounts, but they forgot almost everything else.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't make any sense. I'll give you another company which is extremely data driven, but decided to look at data in a very different way. And this company for 10 years was doing okay. It's a market leader. It was seen as a bully. It did things like stack ranking. So internally in the company, the bottom 10% were knocked out. They had people compete, but rather than pooling and accessing data, they had people competing with each other on how much data they would have and share, because they had divisions against divisions, stack ranking. And they also, because of their bully frame, said, we know it all, we don't need anything more. That company basically changed their CEO. The CEO was from inside. And the person basically said, yes, data is very important, but let's be open about data. Let's access it in different ways. And also let's be much more open. Let's
Mm-hmm.
forget about focusing on our past. And if this is our past, I'm going to close that division. And we're going to go from a know-it-all mindset to a learn-it-all mindset. And that company is Microsoft. So for 10 years under Balmer, it went nowhere. Over the last 5 years with Satya Nadella, it competes with Amazon and Apple to be the most valuable company.
It's been amazing. Mm-hmm.
Right? And it's a data-driven software company, but it basically said, let's think about the people. Let's think about being open. Let's think about access. And lo and behold, it succeeds. So which is why the underlying theme of my book is the story and the spreadsheet. You need the data, the math, the spreadsheet, but you also need the people, the culture, and the leadership.
Yeah, it literally may be the best CEO succession in tech in history.
Yes, exactly.
It's unbelievable.
And you see it today in a way, unfortunately, as we are speaking, you see it in a very different way, where sometimes these ideas of generosity and empathy become so important.
Mm-hmm.
So many companies are making decisions with regard to the Ukraine where the data will tell them not to make that decision.
Right.
And so, for instance, McDonald's, under some form of pressure, but still they did make the decision of temporarily closing all their stuff in Russia.
850 stores. Yeah.
Stores. But please recognize this 9% of their global revenue that they just shut off. Right? But they had a choice. If they didn't do that and everybody else did it, the reputational damage, right, would never be measured in the loss of 9%, would be much, much deeper. And that is why I basically say there are other data points. And some of those data points I'm sure they did that, I'm sure shareholders were pressurizing them, but in most companies, the real pressure point are the employees. So employees and customers pressurize companies to do the right thing now. And
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden you're seeing companies having to make those decisions. And that's why, again, it's the successful combination of, I have to run a business. My business runs on data, but what are some other data sources, right? Like corporate reputation. How many of my people will not will quit if I don't do the right thing? All of that can also be can be made into math. So I said,
Right.
you can bring it down to math, but make sure your math is broad enough and not narrow.
Right. Yeah.
And which is why I love, your company, because that's what you do. You talk about superheroes. You all are a superhero because you give people superpowers. You widen their aperture.
Yeah, I mean, I really think that one of the things our company does best is in turning people into knowledge superheroes is that we make data and analytics accessible to the broadest number of people in the company. We're becoming very quickly the most deployed data tool of any type at the companies. And
Yes.
we're really focused on this whole emerging topic of data mesh, which I really think about as just getting, those knowledge superheroes, those subject matter experts really engaged with the rest of the organization so that you can humanize the data. Because a lot of people forget that data is really just the facts of the business. When we call it data, it almost sounds technical.
Right.
And something that,
but it's the key things to run the business. In fact,
exactly.
I'm going to give you an analogy or a metaphor, and if you like it and use it, you have to send me 1 cent every time you use it. If you don't like it, don't worry about it. I won't pay you 1 cent. But this is not exactly how a data mesh works, but I just give you sort of a thought. For many organizations, the way they were using data, it was like a spider web. It was sticky, it was centralized, and to a great extent, nobody knew how to use it. They got caught in the goo.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a mesh of a sort, like a spider web, right? What you all have done is you'll have converted that into a trampoline. It's still a mesh, but it basically makes everybody a superhero. They can jump faster and harder because people know how to jump. They may not know how to crawl the web. And so
Mm-hmm.
to a great extent, you've made it very accessible. And that means you give me these superhero powers because now I can leap higher because you've now got me a trampoline.
Right. I love that. Yeah. That's a great, I may have to pay you a cent every time.
Yes. Right. But that's exactly what it is. It's you can have a spider web. It's crawly, creepy, really hard to use, right? All very centralized. Or you can have a trampoline, which everyone can use,
right,
and jump up.
So when you think about leaders and people really trying to drive data-driven cultures, what are the best practices you've seen from a cultural standpoint where they can really drive empathy in the organization when it comes to using the data, to working with the data? We touched on that a bit with the McDonald's example, but what are some other examples?
So there are 3 ways that they do it, and here are some sort of examples. The first one is to always let people know that it's about how they leverage and use the data and give people degrees of freedom. The data is data, facts are facts, but you as a employee, a member, or whatever it's called, of the organization should have some freedom within the framework. So the data is a framework, but you need to have some freedom. What you don't want is to give people that this Excel spreadsheet or this database will spit out the answer, which you go implement.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Because if you do that, you're making me subservient to a machine versus working with the machine, which nobody wants to do. But the other is you basically don't need that employee. If the machine can spit out a number, which they then have to go implement, or a guideline or a protocol, and they have to implement, then why should they have a job? That can be automated away. So the example I give is United Airlines versus Southwest Airlines. They're highly data-driven companies. They're data-driven in all kinds of ways, from fuel economy, arrival, gates on time, jets, safety, FAA rules. It's numerics and numbers. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Why is it that one of them has gone bankrupt twice or maybe thrice, and one until COVID never lost money. Same planes, same airline, same airport, same FAA, right? It's because they let Southwest basically says, within this framework, you, the pilot, you, the ramp manager, you, the flight attendant, can bring your personality and you can use this data in any way you want. But this is the framework. You can't break out of the framework. But within this, you can do whatever you want. And therefore, the experience on Southwest tends to be better. The employee retention in Southwest is 5 times better. And all of those eventually end up at stock price, better costs, and everything else. And that's another example of exactly the same category. So I show people that so much of it is the company with the same amount of data, but using it in different ways and tying people into it in different ways, right? Which is some follow the sticky spider web and some follow the trampoline. Trampoline always wins.
Right, right. When you think about, well, one of the things that you've written about that it really stuck with me is the importance of getting different perspectives in building a case for what you ultimately think is true. And I'm curious, in that, what role do you see data playing in that learning process?
I believe that data plays a very critical role in the learning process. So what I usually suggest to people, and now I'm a starving author, but once upon a time I was a senior executive, okay? And I would suggest the following 3 things to my teams, which actually kept us, I think, pretty good. So the first thing was, I want you all to basically tell me, what does the data say in facts? What does the data say in your interpretation? And what about the data are you suspicious about? So whenever you look at anything, tell me what you believe are facts and true. Tell me what you are interpreting, and tell me what you're suspicious about. Because I've never seen anyone who says, I've got all the answers are in the data, it's perfect, everything is just decided, because they're always doing something. Once they do that, I then ask them, and this is where the diversity of opinion comes in, get different people to look at the same thing and interrogate it. Mm-hmm. Right? And when you begin to have 3 or 4 different people looking at the same data set, you actually come up, it's sort of a wisdom of the crowds approach. You actually come up with a much better approach than if you were doing it by yourself. But also with the attitude, which is data is key. You can't just make gut decisions. Right. There is data. But while data is key, it's how you use it, how people read it, how you interrogate it, and then what you bring to it takes it from being a key to basically being a magic lamp. So a key only opens a door. A magic lamp basically takes you to different places.
Right. In one of your recent blog posts, which I've been really enjoying your blog overall, you write that, and I'm quoting you here, people will not adapt to the way of the company, but the company needs to adapt to the way of the people. How do you see that manifest in product development, for example? And what are some examples of what goes right when companies think about the value they're delivering to customers, and what can go wrong when they clearly do not?
So, an example is, again, this is an amazingly successful company, which for a few years missed something, because even though they were so focused on customers, they forgot about people. They only remembered customers. Okay. So this company, which again is very successful, continues to be very successful, but for a little while lost its way, but then found it right again, is Procter Gamble. And Procter Gamble is an absolutely amazing company with very talented people. But at one particular stage, they started looking at things very narrowly from the perspective of the customer. So they looked at everybody as a customer of Procter & Gamble's products. And you might say, well, Procter & Gamble makes so many amazing products. That's probably, they'll see a very good perspective of a person. And my belief is not really, because every P&G product, with the exception of a few here and there, do just one thing. They remove dirt. They're a dirt removal company. They remove dirt from your butt. They call it Charmin. Your kid's butt, it's called Pampers. From your teeth, it's called Crest. From your clothes, it's called Tide. Do you define your life, or do you see dirt removal as a core to your identity, your hopes, and your dreams as a person? I doubt it. Maybe some people like Swiffer, maybe some people like Febreze, but I don't think you tattoo Swiffer on yourself.
Right.
And so what happened is they began to see the company only through the eyes of their brand, and they missed a lot of things. And one of the things they missed, which came to hurt them a lot, was how the world of shaving had changed. So they spent a lot of money on Gillette. And Gillette, competing with Schick, had a way. And the way basically was, it was a product-based way, which is, I'm going to basically add a blade every 2 years and charge a little bit more money. So there was 1 blade, 2 blades, 3 blades, 4 blades, 5 blades. I'm going to heat the blade. I'm going to vibrate the blades. I'm going to do everything else. Now, somewhere along, 2 things began to happen. One is, if you wanted to buy one of these things, you probably needed a down payment. When your product, which is a humble blade, is kept behind locked doors at Walgreens, where they keep Scotch whiskey, you know you have a problem. You really do have a problem. Okay? So that's number one. So highly expensive, very strange product. They did all their stuff on television advertising, and they say, we've got distribution in all the stores. We own the airwaves. We have the 5th blade and the 6th blade, and ain't that cool? Here's what they missed. They missed the 2008, 2009 recession, where people became intensely price sensitive, right? The second thing that they missed is something called the advent of social media and the advent of broadband. So YouTube became very big. And as a result, they allowed a company called Dollar Shave Club to use Facebook to sample products, to target their customers, give them a free thing, and basically say, I'm going to give you an as good product for much lower cost, delivered to your home so you don't have to feel like a shoplifter. They lost 15 share points. They had to write down the value of their acquisition, $8 billion. Right?
Oh.
And that is why I always basically say, people, figure out how your company works around people. People today are the following, and this is the example I use. It was in this article that you saw. It's called SAVE, right? S.A.VE.
Yeah, I love that. I
Right?
shared that with our whole
Yeah,
team.
so solution, access, values, and experiences. But if you look at about it, is if you think about today, somewhat in the, even like myself, and the example was I was watching a TikTok video. I was watching TikTok. I saw an ad on TikTok. It basically allowed me to buy a product and then ask whether I would like it to be delivered at home the next day or whether I would pick it up from the store. So I was walking by the Target store, so I picked it up from the store and I went home. And then I had a thought. And I tend to get these long after everybody else has figured it out. I figured it out. So I said, wait a second, something odd happened here. In the way my clients are organized, and even my old place of work might be organized, what was this? Was this about marketing or sales? Most companies have marketing and sales are not integrated. They fight with each other. So marketing is supposed to be all this advertising stuff, and sales is like, the in-store stuff and everything else. So was that marketing or was it sales? It was both. Was it above the line or was it below the line? It was both. Was it online because I started on TikTok, or was it offline because I ended up in store? Was it social? Was it mobile? Or was it e-commerce? It was all of it. So in effect, our client organizations are organized for yesterday. When we basically say we want omnichannel, off and online, very fast, and I don't give a damn whether your organization is not structured for it, but that's what I want. That's what I mean by you have to handle it that way, because if you don't, it doesn't matter that your brand is so amazing. It just doesn't matter. And industries that are figuring it out is something who thought they're so special, so amazing, that they can decide exactly how their products get sold. It's called luxury products. Well, that's changed a lot. And some of the amazing leaders like L'Oreal and others, 25 to 30% of their sales are through e-commerce. Because they began to realize, guess what? I'll go to a direct-to-consumer brand. I'll go to somewhere else, but I'm not going to basically bend to you, client or company. You're going to bend to me. And that, by the way, is what often senior management don't get. So I often arrive there now, especially in these days when I can't be fired because I've not been hired, right? I go in and say, like, I would like to talk to you about the turd on the table. That's a chapter in my book. All of you are sitting around thinking that thing in the middle of the table is so cool and it's brown and moist and it's a brownie. It's actually a piece of shit, right? And if you don't have that, you begin to have mistakes at a very terrible scale, which unfortunately we're suffering from, which is we have the Tsar of Russia didn't get any input and facts from anybody, but just basically sitting at the end of a long table with nobody around him. Imagine some alternate reality, which now he's enmeshed in and he doesn't know how to get out of, so he's bombing everybody. That was an example of, if you don't have diverse points of view, if you don't bend to reality, reality will not bend to you. It's one of the things I tell people. Gravity doesn't care if I tweet about it that I don't believe it. If I create an anti-gravity club, if I jump out of this window next to me, it's on the 27th floor of a high-rise in Chicago, I'm going to die. Gravity doesn't care. I bend to gravity. Gravity doesn't bend to me. That's the basic thought.
Well, Rashad, really appreciate all your thoughts. Really appreciate your help at Data.World as we really focus on turning our customers into knowledge superheroes. It's a very exciting time for our business, as you know, and we just really are thankful to work with you. And I would encourage everybody watching this, tune in to your book, tune in to your Substack. You will learn a lot. You will become a better leader, and you ultimately will create a company that has a lot more empathy and connection to its people and its customers. Thanks so much, Rashad.
Thank you. Really, and thank you for letting me be part of Data World, because you all are the superheroes. I'm just holding on to the cape and going for the ride.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
You bet.